Rastafari. What's happening, people? We've got a few boxing topics to discuss today. Shout out to everybody in the live chat. How you doing? How you feeling? It's good to have you all on board. Shout out to Dominic A, Regulus, Dynamic Clips, KB, JR, Matthew Berry, Arco, Enki. Where's Enlil at? Enki, big up. Samil, Jimbo Jones, Exactamundo, that's right, Rastafari, big man. Chainsaw. We got XMB, 45. Austin Spears, Roz B, yes. We got Super. Okay, I don't know where you've got that from, Super, but I've definitely never said that. I've definitely never said that. And saying that I said, I guess he must be trolling me. Fury could never beat AJ in a street fight because of AJ's rough upbringing in Watford. Watford has never been rough, so I definitely didn't say that. Jimbo Jones in the house. Yems, Brandon, Warts, Ibrahim, Dog Boone, Jonathan, Isaac. Big up Isaac. All right, so we'll get straight into it then. Big up D. So in yesterday's stream, we were talking about how weird it was that the Canelo Crawford fight wasn't really being advertised. There was, I think, an announcement trailer shortly after the fight was officially announced, but nothing since. Radio silence. And here we are, what is it, 3 weeks out or something from that fight? Maybe less than that. Right as I said that yesterday, and we were all wondering, they just dropped a trailer today. Have you guys seen it? There is a Canelo Crawford trailer which just came out today. In fact, let me get the screenshot up if it's here. Did I? Maybe I don't have it up here. Let me find it. I'll put this screenshot up. Yeah, there it is. We'll talk about how Crawford's looking in training, because that's what most of the focus seems to be, is how Terence Crawford looks. You know, people like to get hyperbolic and say that he's jacked now and he's the size of the Incredible Hulk. He's massive. He's just as big as Canelo. We'll come on to that because it is a little over the top. But here is the thumbnail. You guys can go watch this for the trailer. It just got released today for Canelo Crawford. And it has to be said, this is a pretty standard trailer. It isn't what we've come to expect from Turki Al-Sheikh. You know, we've seen the most spectacular boxing trailers in the history of the sport since Turki started doing boxing events, right? The trailer for both, two trailers for the Usyk Partridge fights, the trailer for Joshua Ngannou, the trailer for, was it called The Magnificence? What was that show called that had Hrgovic versus Dubois and, all those fights? I forget the name of that card. Obviously, you had, it was 5v5. That was right, it was 5v5. But they had Deontay Wilder on there fighting for Matchroom and all that kind of stuff. Those spectacular trailers, are they a thing of the past? I did quite enjoy those. It built anticipation for shows, because we were all wondering, what's this next trailer going to be like? Then there was the, I've spoken about that one. The Joshua Ngannou trailer, which was based on a video game. Then there was the one with, I think it might have been it was the 5v5, the Eddie Hearn versus Frank Warren trailer, which was like done in a Guy Ritchie style. Was it even directed by Guy Ritchie? I'm not even sure. Yes, Rastafari, the real heel. Big up KO Kid. Big up Carlton Palmer. Jimbo Jones says the whole budget has gone on Canelo's purse. Exactamundo says Eubank Jr. Ben was horrible. Why can I not remember that trailer? Maybe it's for the best. But I can't remember the trailer, to be fair. Did the Saudis do a trailer for it? Oh, okay, Carlton Palmer says it was directed by Guy Ritchie. All right. Yeah, the Wild West Fury Usyk. For me, that was the best one, I think. Or my favorite one was the Wild West Usyk Partridge trailer. It could be XMB because Netflix did the trailer rather than Turkey. But maybe that was part of the deal, that Turkey wouldn't have to spend his money. Do you know what I mean? On doing a trailer, and they left it to Netflix. And it's a pretty standard Netflix type trailer. Not like it's bad, but it's just standard fare. It's nothing out of the ordinary. We've been spoiled when it comes to trailers with Turkey Al Sheikh, you know? Oh, okay. Exactamundo says the Eubank Jr. Conor Ben trailer had KSI and ISO Speed in it. It was weird. Yeah, I vaguely remember something with KSI in it. But anyway, Terence Crawford training for this Canelo Alvarez fight. And I agree with what people were saying yesterday. There doesn't seem to be that much buzz for this matchup. I don't know what it is. It's the lack of promotion to some extent. But also, I don't really think either of these fighters is hot right now with the boxing public. Again, coming off two unconvincing performances. Canelo Alvarez against William Skull. That was the most boring fight of Canelo's career, I want to say. And Terence Crawford barely scraping by Madrimov. I thought that fight could have gone either way, genuinely. Carlton Palmer says, you'd think that Netflix would be expert at doing trailers. Well, I want to say they're pretty good, but it's just the levels were so high with the Turkey Al Sheikh Riyadh season trailers. It's, do Netflix really want to spend that kind of money? I don't think so. Shout out to Stephen Pemberton for the super chat. He says, I feel remiss in taking so long to say thank you. You were definitely one of the first who got me on the path to consciousness many moons ago. I have been a listener for many years. I don't recall ever hearing you mention. Big up, Mr. Pemberton. Thank you very much for the super chat, and I'm glad I've been able to assist you on your journey. Much respect. Alan Watt of Cutting Through the Matrix. Yep, I'm very familiar with Alan Watt. Big up, Stephen. And we can talk about some deep stuff once we got through the initial boxing topics here, for sure. I know you guys like it, so we can get into that. No problem whatsoever. But yeah, the Canelo Crawford fight. So what do you guys think of the way Crawford looks here? Because I've been a little surprised to hear a lot of people saying that Terence Crawford looks as big as Canelo Alvarez. For me, he doesn't look anywhere near as big as Canelo. Has he put weight on, muscle on? Of course he has. But does he look like a super middleweight? To my eyes, hell no. He don't look like a super middleweight. He's got a small frame. He still looks to me very much like a welterweight. He doesn't have the broadness of a super middleweight. He's got more narrow shoulders. Do you know what I mean? He looks like a little man. He doesn't look like a 168 pounder. So I'm sure he's more hydrated. He's definitely going to be more hydrated. 168 pounds, and he's packed a bit of extra muscle on for strength and what have you. But yeah, to me, the size difference between him and Canelo is still massively evident. What do you guys think? Maybe you guys see something I don't see, Maybe my old eyes are failing me at this stage. Jimbo Jones says his legs look big. And to Stephen Pemberton, is there anything else you want to Is there anything you want me to touch on with regards to other non-boxing related topics in this stream? Because I'll happily do so. So just let me know. Jimbo Jones, okay, his legs look big. Kayvon Green says, I don't think there is as big of a difference in size between Canelo and Crawford. Yeah, he doesn't look like a super middleweight, but Canelo isn't a big super middleweight to begin with. Canelo's a pretty good size super middleweight, bro. He's a pretty good size. He's not tall, obviously. He doesn't have the reach. But in terms of his just natural body mass, he's a pretty good size super middleweight. He's got a big neck, you know, his big trunk. Even his head is big. You know what I mean? It's like Mike Tyson. Yeah. Mike Tyson was 220 pounds. The guys he was fighting were much taller than him, but they were around the same weight. So, for example, Trevor Berbick and Mike Tyson weighed an identical weight, I think it was, maybe within a pound of each other. Trevor Berbick was 6'2", Mike Tyson's 5'10". They weighed identical. When he fought Pinklon Thomas, again, was an almost identical weight to Mike Tyson. I think they both weighed around 217, 218. Pinklon Thomas is 6'3". Now, Bone Crusher Smith was a lot bigger. He was like 6'4", and maybe weighed in the 230s. But Tony Tucker was 6'5", and he was an almost identical weight to Mike Tyson. So even though Mike Tyson was a lot shorter than these guys, he would have been 7 inches shorter than Tony Tucker. In terms of natural body mass, he was the same. And as is the case with Canelo, Canelo's built like a fire plug, bro. He's a very, very thick-set guy, muscular, big neck, big leg, everything big, you know what I mean? Pause. So to me, he's a pretty good size super middleweight. Terence Crawford is not. Terence Crawford, he doesn't have that kind of size to him. Matt said, that's a good question, Matt. Big up Matt for the super chat. He says, should Crawford come in at 160? That is a very good question. Because it's kind of needless to bulk all the way up to 168. I think, anyway. Because Crawford's advantage is going to be agility and speed. And you don't want to give away your main advantage by way of attempting to match Canelo for strength. I think that would be a mistake. So coming in at 160, 8 pounds below. Yeah, maybe. Because I remember when, for example, Roy Jones Jr. fought John Ruiz at heavyweight. That was for the WBA heavyweight title. Roy Jones came in under 200 pounds. You guys know that? I think he came in about 190. So he could have made cruiserweight. Might have been slightly above 190, but he wasn't far off the cruiserweight limit. So he didn't bulk up to like 210, 215, 220 or anything like that. Because some people were wondering whether he would. But I thought, nah, there's no need to do that. He's fighting at light heavyweight. An extra 10 pounds, that's okay. Doesn't have to, he was a small light heavyweight, Roy Jones, but I'm sure he, in the ring, was above 175. He might have been in the mid 180s. So, yeah, Roy Jones thought it was not a good idea to pack loads of extra muscle on. He put a little bit on, but not too much. Came in under 200 pounds to fight John Ruiz, who must have been, 225, 230? So, yeah, maybe Bud would be well advised to do something similar. Put a little bit of weight on, but not too much. You don't want to give away your natural advantages. Because he's never going to be able to compete with Canelo for strength. He's never going to be able to compete with Canelo for power. So don't try to. You know what I mean? Don't try to. And that's the whole thing with Alexander Usyk as well. When he first moved up to heavyweight, the whole thing was he's too small. These big guys are going to be too powerful for him. He needs to get up to 230, 235. And I always thought that was madness. He's got the agility and speed and mobility advantage over most of these heavyweights. By getting up to 230, 235, he's going to be giving that away or diminishing his own advantage. So, yeah, a good comment from Matt there. A good question. Should Canelo come in at 160? I guess the short answer would have been, I don't think he should come in at 168 necessarily. Big up, Matt. XMB's just looked it up. He says Roy was 193. There you go. Just over the cruiserweight limit at the time. In fact, I'm not sure whether the cruiserweight limit had been changed by then, because the cruiserweight limit used to be 190 pounds. I can't recall when Jones fought Ruiz whether the limit had been raised. I don't think it had, actually, because the limit was raised shortly before the David Haye-Carl Thompson fight. It was in the months leading up to the David Haye-Carl Thompson fight that the limit was raised to 200 pounds. And I'm pretty sure Roy Jones Ruiz would have happened long before then, but maybe I'm getting my memories muddled up. A big up, Stephen, he says, much like you, I'm a digital nomad. I know you were getting into crypto and investing. I'd like to recommend someone to you. Francis Hunt has a few YouTube channels, The Market Sniper and Crypto SNI. Okay, I'll definitely check them out. I am very much a noob in the crypto space. I'm no crypto expert by any stretch of the imagination. There's a couple of very smart guys in my element group who are very much crypto individuals who've made a decent amount of money from crypto. So I take their advice. I'll definitely check out the guy that you recommended there, Francis Hunt. And also, believe it or not, I've got some pretty good investment advice from Richard Dwyer. He's got two channels, the boxing channel, and then he's got a channel called Dwyer Crime. He's obviously a lawyer, Dwyer, right? That's what he does. That's his profession. He's a lawyer. And so he gives a lawyer's perspective on various cases that are being covered in the media, mainly in the United States. But he also, I forget which channel it's on, whether it's on the boxing channel or the crime channel, does videos about trading and investment. And I've actually look, I know people say that Dwyer makes some wild predictions at times. He does, and that's why we love him, because it's entertaining. But his investment advice, from what I've observed, right, over the past couple years, has been bang on. Because I've made investments based upon what he's recommended, and it's done well. So, yeah, shout out to Richard Dwyer. You can find good advice on crypto in the most random of places. But yeah, shout out to Stephen Pemberton. I'll definitely check out Francis Hunt. In fact, let me type it in to YouTube right now so I don't forget it. Where are we at? Francis Hunt. Yeah, there he is. Have I seen this guy before? I might have seen him before. But anyway, shout out to Stephen. So, yeah, we've talked about Canelo Crawford, gone through Crawford's pictures. Let's get a show of hands, because I'm still kind of curious who people are going with. Canelo Alvarez or Terence Crawford? What are you guys saying? I'm saying, and I'm going to stick with it, Canelo Alvarez wins on points. As Steven says, Sniper, he's very awake, read Alan's books, and the YouTube stuff is all free. He has a community which isn't free, and don't get me wrong, it isn't cheap, but he teaches a methodology in trading. Traditional markets, crypto, etc. Big up Kayvon Green for the super chat. He says, Hatman, no one outperforms the market over the long term. I'm a bogglehead though, bogglehead through and through. Look up John Bogle. Okay, let me look up John Bogle. Learning from you guys, man. I'm a noob when it comes to all this stuff. I only started getting into it a couple of years ago now. Let me look up John Bogle. It's like the conversation we were having a few live streams ago about the most expensive pizza in history. You know, the guy who bought a pizza with like 1,000 Bitcoin. Is that what it was? 1,000 Bitcoin to buy a pizza? This is obviously in the very early days of Bitcoin. He must be kicking himself. Crazy. Somebody said that he was involved in actually creating Bitcoin. So maybe it weren't so bad for him if he's got plenty of Bitcoin left. Okay, so Canelo Crawford picks. Kayvon Green's got Canelo. Anthony YouTube, big up, he's got Canelo. Nkosi has got Canelo. The Real Hill's got Canelo. Exactamundo, Canelo 100%. Galaxy Edits, Canelo 100%. Wave says Canelo sparring with Boots made me more confident in my Canelo prediction. Mark B's got Canelo is too big. Pause. AJ has got Crawford. Okay, we got a Crawford guy here. He's going against the grain. Carlton Palmer says still going Canelo. Jimbo Jones is taking Crawford. Super's taking Canelo. Striker is taking Crawford. That's an interesting one. All right. Because I've got a question for some of you guys picking Terence Crawford. He's a great fighter, obviously. But I've just got certain reservations about him winning, and I'll explain in a second. Morazman's got Canelo. Isaac says Canelo late stoppage. Exactamundo says he's lumping weight on Canelo at the bookies. Regular says Usyk is dancing to some karaoke music at the moment. Okay. Lawrence King, big up for the super chat. He says Canelo wins on points or late stoppage. He also says, okay, it's the same super chat twice. Big up. Galaxy Edit says Canelo can stop him, but I see him letting Crawford survive. He does tend to do that, doesn't he? He doesn't force the issue a lot of the time, Canelo Alvarez. When he hurts somebody or drops them, he will let them off the hook. XMB says, Head says Canelo, Heart says Crawford. Canelo losing to a welterweight would be the ultimate karma for ducking Benavidez and cherry-picking weak fighters. The distance either way. All right? Big up Lawrence King for the super chat. He says, I think White, like many of this generation, ruined any chance he had of regular big fights by straight inactivity. I think this era has been the inactivity era. Some guys fight once every 2 years. Yeah, although there was a period of Dillian Whyte's career where he was fighting quite regularly. I want to say twice a year, maybe 3 times a year. You know, when he was working his way up to the mandatory position. But certainly since the Fury fight, he's been very inactive without a shadow of a doubt. Exactamundo says, John Bogle looks like a cross between Monty Burns and a turtle. Regular says, those sell your gold ads were everywhere not long ago. I ain't selling my gold, bro. Maybe that's a noob thing for... Maybe that's something that is typical of noob investors like me. We're kind of more bullish on gold than many other people because it's a physical thing. You can hold it, you can whatever. You can use it as currency anywhere. There's nowhere in the world where you can take gold and not get whatever you need for it. It's not necessarily the most practical metal. Silver is better for that. But, you know, to store wealth, me, I like gold. Shout out to Lawrence King for the super chat. And we'll get on to Dillian Whyte. Obviously, that's the topic, the main topic. Shout out to Steven. He says, on a lighter note, I'm an ex-super heavyweight boxer also. I'm a bit older than you at 52. If only I knew then what I know now. Got put down twice in sparring when 20, and it completely zapped. Yeah, it's, you know, I remember when I was in school, in secondary school, high school, kids were so ignorant about boxing because in my friend group that I was at school with, right, in my school, I was the only one that boxed. So they were so ignorant about boxing. And if they saw somebody get knocked down in a boxing match, they'd be saying stuff like, that guy shouldn't even be doing the sport. How could you get knocked down like that? How could you get knocked out like that? And that would put pressure on people not to ever get knocked down in a fight or a boxing match or anything like that. It might even make you question yourself if you're in that kind of bubble with people who are really ignorant about the sport. You know what I mean? Because the reality is anybody could be knocked down or knocked out. But yeah, like I say, it's the perception of yourself. If that happens to you, it can be based upon the attitudes of the people around you, you know? That's why it's important to be around boxing people. Because boxing people tend to be good people. I'm not saying all of them. And when I say boxing people, I mean, you know, like the trainers, other fighters, and so on. Shout out to Chainsaw for the super chat. He says, imagine if we are already in hell, just serving sentences. For example, people that die young had shorter sentences and are released to wherever. Okay, that's an interesting concept. Shout out to Lawrence King. He says, I think Bud could get stopped because I don't believe it's in his personality to do with Charlo and taste the power and run. I think he stays there. Very interesting comment as well. First of all, Chainsaw's super chat comment there. The thing is, I've heard this concept over the decades as far as heaven and hell are not a real place. They are actually here, or well, if you don't want to say they're a real place, they're not somebody where you go, they're not somewhere you go after you die. It's right here. I heard someone once say that heaven is what you make it and hell is what you go through. Okay, so that's slightly different to what you're talking about. You're saying that this is a hell realm, this earth, and people that die young live shorter lives, you know, serve shorter sentences. That's kind of like similar to what the Gnostics believed, because they believed this world was a hell realm, you know. But then, if that is the case, you have to factor in a lot of people enjoy their lives. You know, there was somebody in here yesterday on the live stream saying he's absolutely enjoyed the hell out of his, excuse the pun, enjoyed the heck out of his life. He's loved it. Wouldn't change it for the world. So there are people who have loved their lives from the very beginning. So if this is a hell realm, why are they loving it? Do you know what I mean? How come it's great for them? Are they demons? Are they agents of some demonic force like the Christian devil? I don't know. But it's an interesting idea. I like thinking about stuff like this, you know, just contemplating ideas, throwing stuff around, getting the brain working, you know? Like I said yesterday, this is why I like sci-fi, because it gets you thinking. Now, as far as Bud getting stopped, big up Lawrence again. This is the question I wanted to ask you guys who are picking Bud Crawford. Big up Striker, by the way. If Bud Crawford runs around the ring, William Skull style, I don't see him getting a decision. I mean, Canelo Alvarez has fought many runners, and none of them have got a decision against him. He fought Erislandy Lara back in the day. He didn't get a decision. You know, William Skull, Charlo, he's fought many runners. And you know, maybe Terence Crawford will be happy to win a moral victory by running and having the public say that he won, even if the judges don't. But that doesn't seem, like you say, it doesn't seem like Terence Crawford's personality. He is a closer. He is a guy that likes to put hands on you and try and hurt you in there. And so my thinking is, in order for him to beat Canelo Alvarez, he's going to have to do that. He's going to have to fight his normal fight. And in doing so, he's surely going to get clipped. You know, he'll surely get clipped. And when he does get clipped, I expect him to get hurt. Will he be able to come through it? Will he be able to survive? Maybe. But yeah, Crawford is not a Mayweather who was, at least at 147 and above, safety first. That's not Crawford, bro. Crawford is a guy that likes to get stuck in and take you out. He's not satisfied with going the distance. Obviously, he went the distance in his last fight against Madrimov, but he was still trying to hit Madrimov with some big stuff. It's just that Madrimov had a style which neutralized a lot of what Terence Crawford was doing, truth be told. Crawford couldn't figure out that old Eastern Bloc, jumping in, jumping out, constantly fencing with it. He couldn't figure it out, truth be told. He's not used to that Eastern Bloc rhythm that those guys have. And it threw him off. It kind of disguises the straight right hand. You know the way that Madrimov bounces back and forth on his feet constantly, and then he'll suddenly punch off that bounce? He's messing with the range with that bounce. Yeah? But I always felt, and I said this at the time, that Virgil Ortiz would do better against Madrimov than Terence Crawford, because I just feel like pressure fighters will do better against that style, rather than Crawford, who is a boxer puncher. And he tried to box Madrimov, bang with him when he could. Towards the end of the fight, Crawford started doing a bit better when he was making it more rough, And shout out to Lawrence for the super chat. Lawrence also says, I went to the Diamond District this year in New York, and the chosen people didn't want to sell me gold, only wanted to buy. That tells you just how valuable gold is. They know. Okay, interesting. Interesting. Big up Stephen Pemberton for the super chat again. Much appreciated, sir. Big up the Sweet Mass for the super chat. He says, a Way of the Warrior podcast will be needed soon. We will need to be even stronger than last time. I hope not, but please elaborate if you want to use explicit language or euphemisms. Shout out to Stephen. He says, all confidence. I also done a fair few rounds when Audley found him lacking, with Audley, found him lacking in heart back in 1994. Nearly fell off my chair when he won gold. Also, you knew from first-hand experience what Johnny Nelson knew, because I always found it curious that after Audley Harrison won gold, he had the country at his feet, the BBC rushing to do a deal with him and all this type of stuff. The media fawning over him. People were very excited because he was the first British fighter to win a gold medal at the Olympics for how many years? Decades? But Johnny Nelson, amidst all that, I will never forget it. He came out and said, I don't think Audley's going to make it as a pro. I was like, why not? Big 6'5" guy, 85-inch reach, just won the Olympics. Like, why is Johnny Nelson being a party pooper? But he obviously knew what I didn't yet know about Audley. And Stephen obviously knew it as well. Shout out to Stephen Pemberton. From first-hand experience, the Audley just didn't have it in the heart department. I know Audley always talked a good game. He always projected confidence. But it was an act. He was never really that confident inside, deep down. He was all superficial with Audley Harrison. He read as many Les Brown self-help books as he could, but that wasn't able to make him truly believe deep down. Stephen says, you asked me about topics. People with special abilities fascinate me. I've seen and experienced too much to be a non-believer. I know 3 who can tune into someone's energy they never meet and be, I guess you meant to say, spot on. On about their personality traits. I did get into numerology for a while, and a good numerologist is incredibly accurate, much like the lady who read your horoscope. Yes, I've become convinced, and again, I always have to say this, because the skeptics are the skeptics are always there. I used to be a skeptic. I was never into anything to do with astrology, none of that. I totally dismissed it in my ignorance, right? Because I hadn't really researched it properly and I hadn't experienced any of that kind of stuff for myself. Now, I was always, even through my atheist period, I was always open to the possibility that some people were able to know things before they happen, precognition and stuff like that. Because I'd experienced things like that too, myself, on a relatively low level, on a trivial level, And so even I wasn't totally convinced that psychic ability was a real thing, but I was open to it because I experienced enough strange things like that for myself to not be completely closed off to it. But as far as astrology, I was like, it's a lot of rubbish, man. What nonsense. You'd read the newspaper and it's got like, whatever he's called, Russell Grant and Mystic Meg, and it was so generic. I just thought this is a load of rubbish. Big up the Sweet Maps. He says, best countries to go off grid. Off grid. It depends what you mean by off grid. If you're talking about off grid as in not having to rely on the internet, or do you mean off grid as in fully off grid? Homesteading and stuff like that. Minimal interference from the government. Because there are quite a few countries in Latin America where you can live pretty much detached from the system. Same goes in Africa. And it may be the same in Asia. I'm not as familiar with Asia, the Far East. But certainly in many parts of Latin America and Africa, you can live off grid. I mean, there are some countries in Africa, for example, many countries, where they still, for the most part, do not accept credit or debit card payments for most transactions. It's cash. Yeah. I mean, in fact, even in parts of Eastern Europe, it's like that. In Albania, people prefer cash. Not many businesses, last I checked anyway, take credit cards or debit cards. They want you to pay cash for almost everything. It's like that in Tanzania. They want cash for everything. They don't want your debit or credit cards, although Tanzania has changed a lot since their last president passed away, unfortunately. And it's now much more difficult for foreigners to go there and stay for any prolonged period of time and do whatever. But I would say, Costa Rica's fairly good, off-grid. In most developing countries, not all of them, you understand, but in most of them, the government has a more hands-off approach rather than a hands-on approach. You're not going to have as many issues with them. Unless you start openly criticizing them, then you'll have more issues with them than you'd ever have in the West. Because freedom of speech is a rare thing. Not like the West has got total freedom of speech and it's definitely being eroded as we speak right now. But relative to most countries in the world, the West has a lot more freedom when it comes to criticizing government. Now, in other countries around the world, which are dictatorships, you can criticize many things that you're not allowed to criticize in the West without getting cancelled, maybe even prosecuted. But when it comes to criticizing government, outside of the West, it's not a safe thing to do. I'm just telling you now. So if you're going to go to wherever, a place in Latin America, a place in Africa, a place in the Far East, live off grid, there are plenty of places you could do that. Obviously, you want to pick somewhere where homesteading is going to be easier, if that's what you plan to do. Do you plan on doing homesteading? And also, the response that governments had to the, I'll just call it that. Some people were calling it the beer bug, right? The response that governments had to that kind of, and you can't say all of them because some of the governments have changed quite radically since, but the response that some of the governments had to that should inform your choices going forward as far as which country you want to go off grid in. One of the reasons I came to Costa Rica was because of their very relaxed response. You know what I mean? Very, very relaxed response. And I was like, I'm going there. Shout out to the sweet maths. Anyway, let's move on from Bud Crawford here. You guys have given your Bud Crawford picks. Bud Crawford, Canelo Alvarez picks. Most people are going for Canelo Alvarez. Some people are resolute that Bud Crawford is going to pull it off, and it would be a great victory if he did. JR says, Nelson sometimes comes out with some pearls of wisdom, then other times it says Usyk is an ordinary southpaw. He'll never live that down, and nor should he. Trollsabad says, Lara did land a lot, to be fair. I don't remember him landing a lot. I remember a lot of blocked punches, a lot of flicking jabs. The man was literally sprinting around the ring. He landed that backhand a few times, but shout out to Christian. Some people are talking about Deontay Wilder versus Dillian Whyte. I've always felt that Deontay Wilder would knock Dillian Whyte out. But the current version of Deontay Wilder against Dillian Whyte, I'd probably still go with Wilder. But it might be a closer fight, or it is a closer fight in my mind's eye than it was when they were both in their primes. Because of the fact that Wilder doesn't seem to have the same velocity on the right hand anymore. There isn't the venom in the right hand that he used to have back in the days. And that will give Dillian Whyte more of a chance, I think. Cal says, Eddie Reynoso's juicy beef tacos versus Victor Conte's snack. Anyway, let's move on to the main topic for this stream, and that is Dillian Whyte saying this. Now, he actually said this in the immediate aftermath of losing to Moses Itauma in the first round, whenever it was. 2 weeks ago now was the fight. Time flies. So I want to say it was a day or two afterwards. He put a couple of posts up saying, I will be back. This latest post is from 2 days ago. So he's had time to think about it. He's had time to reflect. So anyone thinking it was just a hasty reaction from Dillian Whyte saying, oh, I'm going to continue anyway, and maybe after thinking about it, he would change his mind. Well, he hasn't changed his mind so far. 2 days ago, he put this up on his Instagram page. This is not where my story ends. I may have lost this fight, but not the fire that built me. Thank you to everyone who's been standing by me through the highs and lows. I'll be back. TBS obviously stands for the body snatcher. Dillian Whyte, I'll be back. He's not going to retire. If he decides to carry on, as other people are saying, a Deontay Wilder fight, would Deontay Wilder be that interested, though, at this stage after Dillian Whyte got chinned around by Moses Itauma? When you get chinned, in fact, every time you get chinned, your market value, your commercial value goes down a little notch. Sometimes it's temporary, but other times it's part of a linear decline, an exponential decline. And with Dillian Whyte, I'd have to say it's definitely the latter. This guy's been declining for years. His punch resistance in particular. Linkage says, whose chin is worse, Wilder or Whyte? I got to say Dillian Whyte's chin is worse. Chief Wiggum says, Wilder had Usyk and AJ's number with the right hand. Shame it didn't happen years ago. I definitely don't agree with Wilder having Usyk's number ever. I don't think any version of Deontay Wilder would have beaten Alexander Usyk at all. And again, I go back to the Artur Spilka fight, which, never mind what the judges said, Deontay Wilder was blatantly losing. There is absolutely nothing that Artur Szpilka does better than Alexander Usyk. He would be not even a Poundland version of Alexander Usyk, Artur Szpilka. Southpaw, similar dimensions, but just not in the same league. And he was giving Deontay Wilder fits in that fight for like 9 rounds until he actually got greedy and walked onto one. Yeah? If Artur Szpilka can take you 9 rounds and be beating you like he, realistically was, never mind the judges, what are we saying? Usyk can't go an extra 3-4 rounds? Really? No, I don't see Wilder beating. I mean, look, we won't know. We don't have a time machine. But in my personal opinion, I just do not see Wilder, any version of Wilder, beating Usyk at all. I don't see it. Sean Gallagher says, have you listened to Journey of Souls by Michael Newton? Theory is, we are all here to learn lessons. We choose our life, our parents, etc. Also states some souls have been here many times. Yeah, that's a very popular concept, which long predates Michael Newton. It really comes out of the Eastern spiritual traditions, from India and whatnot, because it's dealing with reincarnation. And it's not like the Indians were the first or the only civilization to incorporate reincarnation into their belief system. No, but the popularization of that type of reincarnation, it would seem, in the modern age, stems from Eastern spirituality and what have you. And yeah, the idea that you come back here every time to learn lessons and perfect the soul. And so in those Eastern religions, they have the concept of nirvana. Once you've perfected your soul to such an extent, you'll basically just disappear. Yeah, that's what those Indian yogi masters allege, are alleged to have done. Some of them, they reach such a enlightened spiritual state that their physical body disappears. But yeah, other people talk about you come here to learn lessons and you literally pick the character you're going to be. You pick your parents and all that type of business because you think you need to go through whatever in order to evolve spiritually. I mean, it's a very interesting idea. And again, I don't know whether it's true or not. But what I would say is, if you're wise enough as a spirit before you incarnate to know that you need to learn certain lessons, then isn't that a contradiction? Do you know what I mean? If you're picking your parents and you're wise enough to know, okay, I need to learn these lessons, then what exactly is learning the lessons? You see what I'm saying? Because you're already wise enough to know that you need to learn the lessons. So why are you sending yourself back? Why are you reincarnating with lessons that you already know that you need to learn? If you know you need to learn them, that means you've already learned them, right? Does that make sense? Am I buzzing here? And also, with the reincarnation thing, why are we born with amnesia if we're constantly reincarnating? Because surely it would be better and more efficient and more effective if when we're born we have memory of our previous lives so we can pick up where we left off. Do you know what I mean? It'd be better if we had memory of our previous lives so we don't go on making the same mistakes over and over, like flipping Groundhog Day. Because obviously the movie Groundhog Day is based upon, like the Eastern concept of reincarnation and what have you. Because in Groundhog Day, I can't remember how many lives he has to live before he realizes, hang on, I'm living the same day over and over again here. Something's not quite right. It takes him quite a while before he realizes what's going on. Big up Toro TV. He says, big up Hatman. NYC supports Dillian. We know about Atama now, but can relate more to Whyte. Okay. Why is that? Why can you relate more to Whyte? Toro TV says, that right hand though, but Usyk is smarter than Spilka. That KO is a good memory for me. Yeah, Spilka got slept. That was a horrible KO. Shout out to Kayvon Green. He says, Wilder is the definition of an overachiever. I think there are more overachievers. I mean, I hear what you're saying. He's an overachiever to some extent because you take the right hand away and there's really nothing there other than a heart. Because Wilder always had heart. But Wilder was quite skilled at landing that right hand. He wasn't too skilled at landing much else. But he did develop a knack and a skill at landing that right hand. And I've seen far more crude and less physically gifted fighters than Deontay Wilder become world champions. I mean, an example, when we talked about this in a stream, I want to say a few months ago, you look at a guy like Sam Solomon. Have you seen Sam Solomon box? I mean, he looks like somebody, you know, they say that certain people were born to be fighters, born to be boxers. Sam Solomon is like the opposite of that, bro. If you see that guy move around the ring, it's as if he was born to stay the hell away from a boxing ring. Do you know what I mean? Because everything looks wrong about Sam Solomon's movements, everything. The nearest guy to Sam Solomon I can think of, and he's not as awkward looking as Sam Solomon, would be Sakio Bika. So some guys have really got very little coordination, very little natural balance or anything. No kind of rhythm to them. No real special punch like Deontay Wilder had. So, yeah, I definitely would agree that Wilder's an overachiever to a certain extent. But in terms of the most extreme examples of an overachiever, I would say people like Sam Solomon, you know, Sakio Bika, those guys. They just appear to have no natural aptitude for boxing at all. Shout out to Lawrence for the super chat. Lawrence King, he says, if Whyte fought Chisora next, who would you have? I'd have Chisora winning. And I felt like Chisora would win even before Dillian Whyte got knocked out by Itama in a round. I was already feeling like if they have a trilogy match right now, Chisora and Whyte, Chisora will win because I feel like his chin is better preserved. And even though Chisora's coordination is going as well, I feel like he's got a bit more fire left in the belly. When's the last time that Dillian Whyte showed any real fire? He maybe showed a bit of fire in the Franklin fight. A little bit. But it was certainly absent in his other fights, right? Obviously against Moses Itama, there was just nothing there. Dillian Whyte says the fire is still burning. Well, we didn't see it. And it's not just the fact he got chinned before he could show it, because even on the walk to the ring, I think most of you guys would agree, Dillian Whyte looked like he was checked out. He didn't look like he was the Dillian Whyte of old. There was no howling and all that. Chief Wiggum says, I don't believe in reincarnation on Earth, but imagine coming back as one blade of grass in the corner of a massive field. Well, of course, that would be assuming that blades of grass are conscious. And I'm not saying they definitely aren't. That's a big debate, right? And that's something which vegetarians and vegans don't want to think about, which is the possibility that plant life is actually conscious. Maybe not a form of consciousness that we could comprehend because they don't have the same senses that we do. But again, the idea that they're actually conscious. There was a guy, I forget his name now, who wrote a book on this with some scientific research to support his claims. Not prove his claims, but support his claims. It was called The Secret Life of Plants or The Secret Life of Trees. One of the two. Now, the reason that vegans and vegetarians obviously don't want to believe or don't even want to entertain the possibility that plant life is conscious is because not all of them, some of them it's just purely about health, but with a lot of them it's a spiritual thing whereby they don't eat meat, they don't eat animals because they don't want to be part of that food chain of death and suffering, right? But if plants are also conscious, then they are part of that cycle, the hierarchy of death and suffering, you know? I mean, there are people, and maybe there's been research on this, who talk to their plants. You know, people that keep plants in their house? They talk to their plants and they swear that the ones they talk to and give positive vibes to grow bigger and stronger and they live longer and all that type of stuff. Make of that what you will. Shout out to Lawrence King for the super chat. Shout out to Super for the super chat. He says, 10,000 years or so, there were 10 million people on the planet, if memory serves. Now there's 8 billion. Where do all the new souls come from? Well, that's a good question. And it's interesting that I'm no expert on Eastern spirituality, by the way, folks. I just want to make that very clear. But I've heard that there are some Hindus, for example, I'm not sure if it's many of them, and this is a really controversial topic now, particularly in places like the United States, but apparently there are some Hindus who are not opposed to abortion because they argue that there's actually not enough souls to inhabit all the bodies that are on the planet. Have you guys heard about this? So basically Hindus are advocating the idea, or some of them anyway, I'm not saying all of them. Some of them are apparently advocating the idea, the concept of NPCs, non-player characters. Yeah? Because that's basically what they're describing. If they're saying that there's not enough souls currently on Earth to inhabit all the bodies, that means a lot of the bodies walking around are just meat robots. Yeah, biological robots with no sentience. So that might be a possible way of answering what you're saying there. You know, if there was 10 million people on the planet 10,000 years ago, how come there's 8 billion now? Where are all the souls coming from? Maybe most of them don't have souls. I don't know. I have no idea, but what do you think? Some people say other dimensions. Dog Boone says plants have awareness. Plants were used as the first lie detectors. Okay, that's interesting. I haven't heard that before. Please expand. Big up Stephen. He says, I don't believe in reincarnation as it's portrayed and coming back time and again for lessons. My understanding is the soul's main job is to seek out the spirit. Then you have the Holy Trinity. Mind, body, and soul. Action Popcast says there definitely seems to be self-aware people and non-aware people, 100%. I have encountered people, many people, throughout my life who appear to barely be sentient at all. It's like they're just a programmed bag of responses, like an NPC. There are even certain members of my own family who are kind of like that, you know? There doesn't seem to be much in there. Not much thinking going on. Not much contemplation going on. Because when you talk to them about like these types of subjects, well, we're just throwing ideas around. You know, we're not being dogmatic here. We're throwing ideas around. They will go totally blank. You know them ones? People who just like glaze over and they're like, oh. What's on the telly? Let's talk about the football. Let's talk about the latest Marvel movie. That's all that they can manage to actually discuss. If you talk about anything deeper, they just totally glaze over. It's like, yo, they've reached the limit of their NPC programming. And there's nothing else in there. Let's get some different visuals up since we've moved on from boxing here. We can still talk boxing if anyone wants to come up with any boxing comments or questions. No problem. Striker says that's most people. Dominic K says perfect time to plug the Element group. Pick up Dominic K. Shout out to G-Man. He says, I live with a guy who is able to let his loud alarm go off for 10 minutes while going about his business. Never bothered him. Like the sound wasn't there. He was an empty vessel. Colin Palmer says, Meet Robot sounds like a description of Daniel Dubois. Now, I could expand on that, actually. But it might be a bit controversial expanding on it here on YouTube. I might have to save that for Patreon. Because there are some ideas that people have with regards to the likes of Dubois, which I have talked about on Patreon quite a few times, but I don't want to touch it here because, you know, yeah. Moros Man says veganism and health is definitely a contradiction. Well, it depends. Here's the thing, right? So a lot of those Eastern mystics, yogis, gurus, and all those type of people, they're mostly vegetarians, right? Maybe even vegans, but certainly vegetarians. They do not care about building a strong body. They are trying to escape the physical realm. So there's no interest in being big, strong, athletic, and muscular, and this, that, and the other. It's becoming strong spiritually, which is their main focus. And so the way they see it, the more focused they become on the spirit, yes, the weaker the physical body may become. But that's the escape route. So it's a necessary process. And I'm not saying they're right. I'm just saying that's their perspective. So from that perspective, veganism would be healthy. Do you know what I mean? It all depends on your objective and what you're trying to achieve. Action Popcar says, one theory is the brain is like a radio receiving a signal so that the signal comes from. So where the signal comes from, that's the question. And where does it go when the receiver stops working? Well, I am of the suspicion that that is probably how consciousness works. It's quite a popular idea now that the brain is a receiver transmitter of consciousness and not a generator of consciousness. Now, some people would say, well, if that's the case, then why aren't all living things conscious? Well, first of all, we don't know that they're not. But let's say there's differing levels of consciousness. Just like there are differing types of radios, some radios can pick up a much greater spectrum than others because the hardware is more sophisticated. So perhaps that's how it works with human beings. Maybe human beings, because the hardware is more sophisticated, right? The brain, the central nervous system. That's why human beings, as far as we're aware, are more conscious than, if not all other creatures, than maybe most other creatures, the way we perceive it. Yeah, Jazz says the Eastern religions say there's a spiritual center near the top of the brain, 10th chakra, 10th gate, etc. Yes. Big up, Striker. Cal, you're talking about Flatliners. Yeah, that was a very interesting movie. That had Kiefer Sutherland in it. Flatliners, when he was young. Kiefer Sutherland was also in another movie from back in the days, 80s. I want to say 80s, maybe early 90s, called The Lost Boys, which was a vampire movie. It's actually a pretty good movie, or at least I remember it being a pretty good movie back in the days. The Lost Boys. Yeah, they remade Flatliners and it was terrible. Most of the remakes are diabolically bad. Like the remake for Total Recall, for example, was terrible. Dear, oh dear. Colin Farrell is a great actor, but that Total Recall remake was horrible. Even RoboCop was horrible. Good God. Apex Bossman says, have you heard of the Russian scientist that can apparently tag your soul and track where it goes after death? I have not heard that. That's quite a claim. I'd like to know how they substantiate that. Linkage says the Judge Dredd remake was good. Yeah, that was good. Are they making a sequel to that finally? Because that was good. It was much better than the Sylvester Stallone version. Way better. Shout out to Stephen. He says, what are your thoughts on hidden masters of this world? I believe they live for far longer than we do. They also grant life extension to underlings. Henry Kissinger, for instance, giving lectures. It's an interesting idea, and it's something I've heard from esotericists many times over the years, that long life is gifted to certain people. Who knows? You know, I'm open to the possibility. This reality, as somebody said in the stream yesterday, is surely far weirder than we realize. You know, but some people are scared to contemplate how weird this reality actually is behind the veil. I'm not scared. I'm intrigued. But a lot of the mainstream atheist, materialist, reductionist types, they're terrified of the unknown. Absolutely terrified. So whenever we talk about this kind of stuff, they want to shut it down. They don't even want to entertain the possibility that it might be true. Because we're not here being dogmatic. Yeah, I'm certainly not. I'm not saying that any of this stuff. I'm just entertaining possibilities because the truth is, none of us really know. And in fact, I prepared something from yesterday, since we were talking about Baalbek yesterday. So I just want to clear something up here. I think it was Encircled. I apologize to Encircled if it wasn't him who said it. But I think it was Encircled who said that the quarry where the stones of Baalbek are from was only 600 meters away. I mean, 600 meters is still a very long distance to drag 1,000-ton blocks of stone across hilly terrain, uneven terrain, but it's not 600 meters away. There are two quarries in Baalbek, which I'll show you here. So there you go. It's talking about Baalbek, characterized by a megalithic giantism, unparalleled in antiquity. So we're talking about the largest single blocks of stone that we've ever discovered, right? At least in the recent centuries. How the stones were moved from where they were quarried to the final locations is uncertain. So even the most mainstream of mainstream, like Wikipedia and the History Channel, are at least honest enough to admit that they don't know how stones that size were moved, If it was as simple as saying it was log rollers, then why wouldn't they just be saying it's log rollers? Even the mainstream is not pinning their hat on that because it's so, honestly, it's so ridiculous. Anyway, that's one of the things I wanted to show you, right? That even the mainstream admits they don't know how it was done. But with regards to the distances, there are 2 quarries in Baalbek. You can see here, the closest quarry is the western quarry, and that is 900 meters from the temple complex. 900 meters is like 100 meters short of a kilometer. So you're talking about just under a kilometer away. That's the closest quarry. The other quarry is to the south, and it's further away still. So you're talking about, I don't know, in excess of a kilometer away. Maybe a kilometer and a half or something like that. So there's the western quarry and the southern quarry. Let's get it up here. Yes. The second site is the southern quarry, which contains a 1,240 ton monolith. The size of these things are ridiculous, bro. And also, one of the areas of contention that there is regarding these giant megalithic stones at Baalbek is the notion that they are Roman stones, that the Romans put them there. There are many people, and Graham Hancock's one of them, but there are also archaeologists who argue that there's actually no real proof that the Romans moved those stones at all. What we know is that the Romans built the temples upon which the stones sit, upon the stones, excuse me, right? But in the ancient world, and even in much more recent history, it was common practice for a conquering civilization to demolish existing structures and build their own buildings on top. A great example would be Mexico City. So Mexico City used to be an island in the middle of a giant lake before the Spanish conquered Mexico, right? And where Mexico City is today, right in the middle of it, you have these government buildings and cathedrals. And if you look at the base of these government buildings and cathedrals, it's got the remnants of ancient Aztec pyramids. They knocked the pyramids down and only the base with the big blocks at the base of the pyramid remain. On top of them are cathedrals and big Spanish buildings. Yeah. So that was standard practice even in relatively recent history. That'd be like, what, 500 years ago or something? Same went on back in the ancient world, at the time of the Romans. Conquering civilizations would typically destroy the pre-existing buildings. And even when they didn't destroy pre-existing buildings, they would use the foundations of, let's say, dilapidated buildings to construct their own structures on. Because why give ourselves extra work if there are these giant monolithic stones, which are right here waiting for us? Some other civilization has built them. Well, why not just build our stuff on top? Do you know what I mean? It makes perfect sense, logical. It's like, for example, with they didn't completely destroy them, thankfully, but the pyramids at Giza are missing most of the casing stones. Yeah, because they were originally smooth and shiny on the outside. Some of the casing stones were apparently knocked off because of an earthquake, but others were removed by Muslims, right, who used the stones, many thousands or millions of casing stones, to help construct their mosques and stuff like that, and even houses, you see. Now, one of the reasons that a lot of people are not convinced by this notion that the giant stones at Baalbek were moved by the Romans is because it's totally atypical of Roman construction. There is nowhere else, anywhere, where the Romans have moved stones like that, of that size. Romans didn't build like that. Romans would always chop stone up into much smaller pieces. All of their famous constructions are done like that. Even the famous Roman columns, they didn't construct Roman columns like ancient Ethiopians and ancient Egyptians, where they would have obelisks, which were a single piece of stone. And by the way, the largest ever known obelisk still exists today. Unfortunately, it's fallen over. It's in Ethiopia in a place called Axum. Larger than any of the obelisks that the ancient Egyptians ever built or anything like that. It's in Axum in Ethiopia. But yeah, the Romans didn't do single piece obelisks and all that of ginormous size. They were masters at cutting stone into manageable size pieces and constructing that way. So for the Romans to have moved those massive stones at Baalbek, it would be totally at odds with everything else they ever constructed. Why randomly at Baalbek did they decide to move enormous blocks of stone instead of doing what they normally do and chop the stone up? So as far as I can tell, and look, I don't have a time machine, it seems more likely to me that it was a pre-existing Middle Eastern culture that moved those giant stones. Yeah? Who they were, how they did it, I got no idea. But some Middle Eastern culture, I suspect, are the ones who moved that. And then the Romans found the remnants of the original construction and built their temples on top of it. All right, got some super chats here. Big up D-Man for the super chat. He says, I've been there a few times. Those stones were bigger than the pyramid ones. Even nowadays, we would struggle to move those. Highly impressive. Yes, I remember you mentioning that you've been to Baalbek. I would love to go there. But unfortunately, it's, the Lebanon is not a stable place. So it's very sketchy, as I understand it, trying to go there. And they're very suspicious of people going there and all that. Shout out to D-Man for the super chat. Oh, wow. D-Man says the guide said it predated Romans, actually. Oh, that's interesting. That's good. That's good. Because that, to me, seems far more likely that it was some Middle Eastern culture that predated the Romans that moved those stones. Charles B says Atlanteans. I mean, is Atlantis a real place? I don't know. I mean, I'm open to the possibility, but, well, basically Graham Hancock's theory is that Atlantis was not necessarily a place like Plato described, but it was a global civilization, a global maritime coast-based civilization. That's what Atlantis was. That's his theory. So if his version of Atlantis is correct, there's perhaps more evidence for that than the version which predated the Graham Hancock version, the more classic version of Atlantis, that it's some type of, round island in the middle of God knows where, the Atlantic Ocean or whatever, with concentric circles, and then in the middle they've got some type of mountain or whatever. But who knows? Indeed, Wensheng, the appearance of the stones don't look Roman either. And there's even people that say that, for example, the Aztecs didn't build all those pyramids. I don't know. We assume they did, but I'm open to everything being questioned. There's people that say the Egyptians didn't build the pyramids either. Now, obviously, there are going to be pharaohs that claim they built, or there might be pharaohs that claim they built this, that, and the other. Well, pharaohs can lie. You know what I mean? Pharaohs can lie. Because I've heard some people say that, and I talked about this yesterday, a lot of these megalithic structures were not part of this version of the simulation, if we want to talk about simulation theory. They were built in a previous version of the simulation. They're remnants of a previous version of the simulation. And the civilizations in the early millennia and centuries of this simulation, version of the simulation, have just claimed to be the builders of those things, but they weren't really. They painted their pictures on them and did all kind of stuff when really they're claiming credit for the work of people that predated this version of our reality. A shout to D-Man, he says, okay, yeah, I've read that one. Anthony YouTube says aliens. You know, the ancient alien theory is fun. Shout out to Crazy Pickney. Shout out to Mr. Luca in the chat. Welcome aboard, bro. Arco says, Hatman, have you ever wondered what's inside of the Vatican archives? You'd have to figure it contains some of the most treasured religious artifacts and they're just hoarding it all. Of course. Absolutely, of course. Samil says alien theory holds no weight, in my opinion. It's not as popular as it used to be. Back in the 90s, it was very popular. Maybe early 2000s with the ancient aliens stuff. I don't know, bro. I don't know. I wasn't around at the start of this reality, as far as I'm aware, so I can't dismiss the alien stuff. I don't know. At the end of the day, everyone has only got theories. The scientists have got theories. Religious people have got theories. Agnostics like me have got hypotheses and theories and ideas that I just juggle around. It's fun to me, you know? I don't get dogmatic about any of it. It's just fun to throw the ideas around because I got no idea. That sounds like a contradiction. Shout out to Strangingness. He says, apparently a forgotten group of people from a nation that doesn't exist in the Middle East that became the Phoenicians were the first to conquer the UK with superior technology. Yeah, I've heard that before as well. I've heard people say that the original inhabitants of Britain were Phoenicians. Jazz says it's possible that there's absolutely nothing after death. Yep. It's possible. When you're talking about the origins of the universe, this physical reality, pretty much anything is possible. Because we're blind here, folks. We got no idea. That's the truth. We've got no idea. Matthew Berry says, who do you think would win between Martin Bacoli and Triple D? Up until Bacoli got chinned by Joseph Parker, I actually would have said Bacoli. But given how bad he's looked in his last two fights, I might pick Triple D now. It's a good fight, actually. Let's see it. Triple D's coming off a stoppage defeat. Maybe he can get a confidence builder and match him against Bacoli in the not too distant future if Bacoli decides to continue fighting, because he said if he doesn't get a big fight within the next 12 months, he's going to retire and concentrate on his business interests. Shout out to Charles B. Says, I know it sounds ridiculous, but what if dinosaurs aren't as old as they say and they played a part in moving the Baalbek stones? It's a very interesting idea. Dinosaurs are very mysterious and interesting. And again, talking about simulation theory, what if dinosaurs were part of a different version of the simulation? Because there are lots of physics issues with dinosaurs, right? When they look at things like the pterodactyl and various ginormous land dinosaurs, they say, well, hang on, the brachiosaur's neck was too long for its heart to be able to supply blood all the way to the head. And that's why they changed the brachiosaur from being a dinosaur which walks upright with its neck in the air like a giraffe to instead having its neck horizontal most of the time. That's why they changed the design of it. Yeah, in movies and depictions and stuff like that, because they realize the physics don't work. Right? The heart would be too small and not powerful enough to pump all the blood up to that ginormous, through the ginormous neck up to the head. But if gravity was different, if the physics was different, then it would be possible, right? So what if dinosaurs were part of a different version of the simulation where the physics was different? So that's a possibility with regards to dinosaurs, or, an idea to throw out there. But yeah, maybe you could say dinosaurs aren't as old. I mean, going back to the simulation theory, the beginning of time, if simulation theory is true, the beginning of time in our reality would be the start of this simulation. The start of this simulation might not be billions of years ago. It might be 10,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago, or whatever, right? 50, 100,000 years ago, a million years ago. That might be when our version of the simulation began, And all we see, the artifacts and everything, are just remnants of the old simulation. So yeah, maybe in other simulations, dinosaurs were living alongside human beings. Who knows? It's all a mystery to me. Shout out to D-Man for the super chat. He says, do you think deja vu and timelines are related? That's a very interesting question. That is a very interesting question. Regular says, this is not a simulation. If you could bend reality to your will, you would have won already the lottery. I'm not quite sure how that relates, how those two things relate. The idea is, and this is something which quantum physicists are now entertaining, that this universe is some type of very sophisticated advanced simulation being generated or controlled by God knows what or God knows who. Okay? I'm not sure how that relates to bending reality to your will. I'm not quite sure. You'd have to explain more what you mean there. But yeah, D-Man's super chat there, very, very interesting. Deja vu and timelines, are they related? Because deja vu is the most strange thing, isn't it? We've all had deja vu. I'm guessing most of us have anyway. And sometimes really strong deja vu. When you go to a place you've never been before, but you have this, memory. You're like, hang on, I've been here before. And you've literally never been there before. You've literally seen the same scene, just like they depict it in The Matrix, where that cat goes past twice, right? But deja vu doesn't normally happen that quickly. It's normally like years ago, you'll have, I guess you could say, a premonition. Or is it in a previous life? I don't know. But either way, you'll be somewhere you've never been before, and you'll almost see like a freeze frame of a scene that you've already seen in your mind's eye months or years previous. It's a very, very weird thing. Is deja vu linked to timelines? Maybe, maybe. Because maybe on a different timeline, you went to that place earlier. Or maybe it's like the Greek idea of the daemon. You guys know the Greek idea of the daemon in Greek philosophy? A daemon is like an aspect of your consciousness which exists outside of linear time. So it can notify you of things and see things a little bit earlier than you can. And it's from your daemon that you get premonitions, And this also would explain, I'm not saying it's true, but it's interesting to contemplate. This also would explain the way that so-called God works, right? Because God, the Abrahamic concept of God, is all powerful. He can do everything. He can do anything. He could change this reality in whatever way he saw fit. But when people pray, rarely do they get their prayers answered in a straightforward fashion. That, to me, is not suggestive of an all-powerful God. Instead, they get their prayers answered, or at least the way they perceive it to be, because some people say their prayers were not answered at all. They're just, their mind playing tricks on them. But some people say their prayers are answered in a very roundabout way. Well, what if that's not God? What if that's your daemon? The aspect of your consciousness that exists outside of linear time, basically guiding you, helping you to navigate through this reality. Because it can, like I say, see things further down the timeline and what have you than you can. It's not all powerful, your daemon. Its power is that, like I say, it's outside of linear time. So it can guide you towards certain things and this, that, and the other, but it still has to operate within the confines of the rules of our physical reality. So it can't perform crazy miracles like an all-powerful God could. You see what I'm saying? But it can just guide you. It can, let's say if you want to lose a lot of weight, it might put things in your life which will jolt you out of your gluttony. Yeah, because that's the only way it can do it. It's not God. It can't go into your brain and change the way you think on the fly, mold your mind like a piece of plasticine. It can't do that. What it can do is guide you towards certain actions which will lead you to be jolted, right? Maybe some relatively traumatic experience in your life, and that will be the catalyst for you losing weight. Do you understand what I mean? It might be a breakup, it might be losing your job, whatever the case may be. The daemon can guide you towards that because you've told the daemon what you want. I need to lose a load of weight. So it's going to guide you towards some sort of event that will cause emotional upheaval, right? Distressing at the time. But little do you know, the daemon realizes, because it is outside of linear time, it realizes that is going to be the catalyst for you to self-improve. So I like the Greek idea of the daemon, It's interesting. Mr. Grandy says, at 38 years of age and three weights upward battle, Crawford is fighting an uphill battle. I agree. Charles B says, would you rather go back and learn about what happened 10,000 years ago, or go 10,000 years into the future and see how the world ends up? It depends on whether I'm going to be stuck there, and it depends on whether I'll have protection. Yeah. Will I have protection, and will I be stuck there? If I've got protection and I could just go back to have a look, what's the guy called now? Why have I forgotten his name? From Paul Sykes, excuse me. Yeah. If I can go back and have a look like Paul Sykes, then and I've got protection, then I prefer to go back 10,000 years than forward 10,000. 10,000 years in the future seems scary to me, bro. It seems scary to me. Dogboon says, Hatman, the Abrahamic God isn't a wish giver. Indeed, but that's one of the issues, right? Because why wouldn't the Abrahamic God be a wish giver to people who are devout, good-hearted people? That's one of the big issues for me. That's one of the reasons I don't subscribe to the Abrahamic God. One of the reasons. Okay, Charles B says, no, just temporary, so I can come back. All right. Then it would definitely be 10,000 years in the past. Yes, it would definitely be 10,000 years in the past, not 10,000 years in the future. Warren Jackson says there'll be no humans left in 10K, if any. Yeah, who knows? Could be true. There'll be just cyborgs left in 10,000 years from now. Total dystopia. An interesting movie, right? I'm not sure if you guys have seen it. A very, very interesting movie is starring Matt Damon and Emily Blunt. I actually did a movie decoding on this, a deep dive on this. But it's a film called The Adjustment Bureau. Any of you guys seen The Adjustment Bureau? Very interesting movie. Ayed has seen it, yes. Very, very interesting movie. Because that basically deals with timelines. The idea of, fate and destiny. And that basically all of us are living on rails. And there's this hidden hand, which is represented by these men in black type figures. I guess being a metaphor for spiritual forces. And they interfere with your life when you try to deviate from the timelines that have been set for you, or the life paths. I should probably say life paths rather than timelines. When you try to deviate from the life paths that have been set for you, they F things up to make sure you're back on the path that you were supposed to be on. And it may not be the path that you want to be on, but it's the path that has been predetermined for you. And many of us have wondered whether that's going on in our own lives at times, So it's a very, very interesting movie. Ayed says, yeah, really good film. It is a good film. Indeed, they tried to stop Matt Damon and Emily Blunt's characters meeting again. That's right. Charles B says, have you heard about the Dudley Dorito? My friend claims he saw it. Was that they call them UAPs now? Was that a UAP? Unidentified aerial phenomena? Dobrin says, Hatman, even in fiction, wish fulfillment is a big no-no. An almighty God with laws and control will not be a wish giver. But again, if God can do anything he wants, and he's an all-loving God, why wouldn't he be a wish giver? It's the thing. So it goes back to the ultimate question, or the ultimate, not even question, the ultimate observation, that if God is all-powerful, he can't be all good. And if God is all good, he can't be all-powerful, because a tree is known by its fruits. This world doesn't convey, to me anyway, any evidence that there is an all-good, all-powerful God at all. If there is an all-powerful God, he's not all good. And if he's all good, then he's not all powerful. I'm interested in this Dudley Dorito. Okay. Charles B says, yeah, there's been multiple sightings around the Midlands. When was this Dudley Dorito? I love the name, by the way. The Dudley Dorito. When was this seen? Because those triangular shaped craft have been seen certainly all over the United States and parts of Europe for at least the past 35 years, since the early 90s. These black triangles. Now, obviously, we know about, some spy planes and whatnot, the stealth bomber and all that is triangular. But these ones that have been seen, let's say, over the past 30 years, have some type of exotic technology that they're using, because they don't maneuver like conventional aircraft. 2007, okay, that might be around the time when, over the Midlands and also in the Northeast, such a thing was seen. So your friend claims that he saw it. That's very interesting. Did you ask him a lot of questions? Oh, your friend saw it in 2015. Okay. And what did he tell you about it? Like, did you believe his account? Do you reckon he's a reliable person? That's actually really interesting. I want to know more. Shout out to Super for the super chat. He says, thoughts on psych drugs, access to spirit realm. If I had to guess, I would say yes. If I had to guess, again, I'm not dogmatically asserting this to be true for any mainstreamers out there. But if I had to guess, my best suspicion is that yes, psychedelics somehow loosen the filter that exists somewhere in the mind or the brain, which filters out a lot of the reality beyond what we see, in order that we can function, or perhaps this is the reason for it. Maybe there's a sinister reason, I don't know. But perhaps that we can function and focus our attention more so on a smaller aspect of reality to make us more effective. If we were able to see and hear everything or more, maybe we'll go crazy. I mean, that's what people say about schizophrenics, right? I've entertained this idea before in previous streams, that schizophrenics are people that are able to see things and perceive things which are actually there, but they're the valve, the filter in their mind has basically been removed or loosened to allow them to perceive these things. And that's what psychedelics do. That's the idea. I'm waiting for Charles B. I want to hear more about the Dudley Dorito his friend saw. That's got me proper intrigued. So Kayvon Green says, I'm not religious, but you're applying your moral sense of right and wrong. Anything is theory. God does is good regardless of how morals feel also. That's true. Morality is relative. Yes, I'm applying my morality to God. Absolutely, you're right. And it's all relative. People have got different ideas of morality, different ideas of right and wrong. 100%, I agree with you. All I can tell you is from my perspective as an individual, I don't like the way this God is moving. If this God is all powerful, I don't like the way he's moving. From my perspective, he's not all good. And for me, that's what matters, is my perspective, you know? I just can't see, again, from my vantage point, how allowing all the evil that goes on in the world to innocent people is justifiable. If some God has got a way of justifying it and claiming it's good, I mean, yeah, that's not a God I'm interested in following. Do you know what I mean? That's all I could tell you. Charles B says, yeah, basically I got a random call off him and he was shouting down the phone that he saw a UFO. He took his dogs for a walk on the fields at the back of the house at the time and he said he saw it. Wow. A big orange light in the middle of the field, and he told his girlfriend to get a video of it, and he said it flew above his head and his dog started trying to run away and it just went upward and disappeared. Wow, that's crazy. That's crazy. Very similar to other accounts of those black triangles in terms of the way they move about, and yeah. Also, the whole thing with them starting off as a light, and then the light morphs into a black triangle, and this black triangle starts moving around. That's a very common thing for people who have seen these things. Very interesting. Shout out to the box for the super chat. He says, any thoughts on the England flags going up across the country put by right wingers? Reminds me of National Front graffiti. It's clearly for intimidation, in my opinion. I'm not aware of any of this, but England flags going up in England, I don't really see how that's a bad thing. But do some people have ulterior motives? And I don't know. I don't really feel strongly about stuff like that. I mean, again, it's the national flag. If people want to put it up, that's their business. It's, their country. But shout out to the box. How do you feel about it? I guess you don't like it. I mean, yeah, some people may be doing it as a sign of defiance, against the dilution of indigenous English culture. Now, Charles B says, he said it was a big triangle and it made no noise, just was humming and he felt heat. That's interesting. He felt heat. I'm not sure I've heard that before. I've heard the humming one. And yeah, the orb, and then it's a triangle, and then it moves around silently. Yeah, or more or less silently, other than the humming. Strangingness says, the older gods make sense, Hatman, don't you think? They didn't pretend to be good or perfect. They had darker elements and embraced them. Yes. The pagan gods, the old gods, made more sense. Nature spirits, animism. It makes more sense. Again, all of this stuff could be a figment of human imagination. Or perhaps gods are brought into reality like the creature from the id, the monster from the id, where it's like a projection of collective human consciousness, Maybe even animals can project their consciousness collectively and create gods or whatever. Psychic forces. But shout out to the box for the super chat. Okay, I see what you're saying, the box. Yeah, people are going to be doing it for different reasons, but no indigenous culture likes their culture to be diluted by foreigners. Do you know what I mean? Nobody likes it. So I can't expect Europeans to like it, bro. Do you know what I mean? I can't expect them to like it. Oh, okay. Dog Boone says the flag thing comes from Starmer banning putting up flags. Yes, Starmer is a full-on divide and conquer mode now, isn't he? Full-on divide and rule mode. Deliberately antagonizing people with stuff like that. Wow, I didn't realize there was a ban on it. Dear old. Dear, oh dear, oh dear. Keir Stalin. What's going to go up next? The Bolshevik flag? Ayed says Turkey wants to make Opataya versus Chisora, apparently. Okay. That's an interesting one. If he's willing to pay Chisora. I mean, Chisora comes expensive, bro. He's not going to come cheap for a fight like that. Regular says heat is powered by a nuclear engine. I guess you're talking about the TR-3B. So there was a guy called Edgar Fouché who did work for the American government in some capacity. I think he was an ex-military guy. And he proved he did work for the American government in some capacity. He says it was on, black technology, secret classified technology. And he says that there was a triangular craft called the TR-3B. And basically, the TR-3B, he described it as a space platform. And at the center of the TR-3B was, I forget how he described this thing at the center of it, but there was a circular area in the middle of it. And he says inside this circle was a mercury-based plasma that was being cooled to an extremely low temperature and spun at a ridiculously fast speed. Okay, this mercury-based plasma. And he said the effect of this was to reduce the weight of the craft by 89%. Yeah? And then there were, I guess, conventional propulsion methods, or there was conventional propulsion technology also in the craft, which would then move the craft around, right? So it had this weight reduction technology in it, and then conventional stuff to move it around. As far as I can remember anyway. Edgar Fouché. Ayad says Zerdo was out with an injury. Who is Zerdo supposed to be fighting? Oh, I guess you're talking about because he's not fighting Opataya. Yeah, he's blaming it on an injury. Yeah. Indeed, Charles B. Yes, the TR-3B looks like the Dudley Dorito. That's right. Ayad says, did you see Denzel Washington movie about Deja Vu? Isn't it called Deja Vu? Isn't there a Denzel Washington movie actually called Deja Vu? I think it's directed by Tony Scott, Ridley Scott's brother. Is that the one you're talking about? Cal says he's seen a TR-7. Okay, I don't know what TR-7 is. Mac B says, who has a better resume, Chisora or White? Well, you'd have to say White, right? Because White beat Joseph Parker. Oscar Rivas beat Chisora himself. Yes, that's the one. That's right. Yeah, it's called Deja Vu. That's right. Yeah, I have seen that many moons ago. It's pretty decent, I thought, from what I can remember of it. Cal says Madlib or Jay Dilla. I'll go Jay Dilla. Charles B says, I was wondering if there's a hidden base around the Midlands and they test it out every now and then. Well, RDH, I'll just refer to him as RDH because he's a very controversial character. I don't want to get flagged by the algorithm or anything. But RDH went out investigating, I think it might have been in the Midlands, to find an alleged base, secret base, But if these things are like the TR-3B, they can go much faster than any aircraft that we're told about. So it could be from the United States, somewhere else, Far East, Japan, I don't know. The base could be anywhere. Since they can move so quickly and cover vast distances in the blink of an eye. Stranginess says, Hatman, did you used to watch UFO documentaries in the 2000s and 90s? I remember there was always an undertone of the people that believe this are wacky or they're probably not here, bro. Yeah, I used to watch all that stuff back in the days. The mainstream stuff was always condescending and very close-minded. And one of the most illogical arguments that they would always make against interstellar travel by some non-human race from a different star system or whatever. One of the most illogical arguments they would make is that, you can't travel close to the speed of light or faster than the speed of light or blah, 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 and therefore the nearest star that could support life is this far away and it would take far too long to die before they got here. That's just based on a bunch of assumptions. Assuming that they can't go close to the speed of light or faster than it, just because we right now don't know how to go faster than the speed of light and theorize and believe that you cannot go faster than the speed of light. It doesn't mean that some other far more advanced civilization hasn't figured it out. Furthermore, if they were sending, another assumption is the idea that they have lifespans that are similar to humans. Maybe there are life forms which are like cyborgs. Maybe an extremely advanced civilization has developed cyborgs that can basically live indefinitely or thousands of years. Maybe they've learned how to navigate through wormholes. You can't assume that a non-human advanced species living in a different star system is going to be confined technologically the way that we are, or scientifically. It's just a bizarre assumption to make that they would be. A lot of people bigging up Training Day. Yep, I love Training Day. Pro Calla says, Hatman, how do you think a fight goes between a prime Povetkin and a Talma? It's hard to say because we haven't seen a Talma answer certain questions yet about his stamina, his heart, and his chin, and how he figures things out in a fight that he's maybe struggling in, his fortitude. I guess that comes under heart, right? But also boxing brain. So it's really hard to say. We need to see more of Atama. All I can tell you is that right now, Atama appears to have more potential than an Alexander Povetkin. But potential's just potential. Povetkin actually did stuff in boxing. We'll see if Atama can match him or even surpass him. But from what I can see at the moment, Atama appears to have the potential to be able to beat somebody like a Povetkin if he becomes as good as I suspect he will. But I might be wrong. We might be wrong about Atama. Maybe he has a glaring chink in his armor that will negate all of the strengths that he has. Wen Cheng says, anyone seen Gattaca? That was a pretty good underrated film. Yeah, I've seen Gattaca. That stars the same guy from Training Day. What's his name now? Is it Ethan Hawke? It's Ethan Hawke, isn't it? I thought Gattaca was cool. I wasn't really a big fan of it, but he was cool. A big up. Ishmael, he says, Hatman, I was in Islington boxing gym getting some work in, and some guys, a couple of the guys there were saying they watch your content. Big up, bro. And big up yourself. Shout out to the guys down at Islington. Stranginess says the Predator species movie technology, but still tied to their hunter-gatherer ways, seem more realistic to me than a bunch of skinny, big-head green guys. Well, speaking of Predator, anybody see the movie Prey? I thought that was pretty good. It's one of the more recent installments in the Predator franchise. Anyone seen the movie Prey? It's a little, slyly feminist propaganda in there. But it's still good. I liked it. Yep, Ayad liked it as well. I like Prey. For me, that's one of the best Predator movies they've ever done. Is it the second best? Or third best? I mean, it's good. Ayad says, yeah, I really liked it, especially the dog. Valaga says Vladimir Klitschko at 35 was in crazy shape against David Haye. He certainly was. Wenxing says the irony of feminism is that it teaches women to be masculine indeed. Oh, is that right? Did Prey not come out in a cinema? I didn't realize that. Hey, it says it didn't get a cinema release because they thought people wouldn't like it. Well, they were wrong. I thought that film was good. Okay, it was straight to Hulu. Pro Cala says, do you think Corey Sanders had the hardest straight left hand out of any southpaw in heavyweight history? I'm not going to go that far because there may be heavyweight southpaws out there that I'm not thinking of right now who are not champions or whatever that randomly for one shot might have hit harder. But in terms of world level, it's very possible that he was the hardest in terms of the southpaw backhand punching southpaw in history. It's very possible. He was certainly the most explosive heavyweight southpaw I've ever seen. Corey Sanders didn't just hit hard, his shots were crazy fast. You know what I mean? He could put the shots together very well. Oh wow, KSA says, spoke to Michael Sprott recently. He fought and sparred many fighters from the past. He said Sanders is undoubtedly the hardest puncher he's faced. Yeah, I remember him saying that during his career because he was stopped in a round by Corey Sanders. And I remember him saying at the time he'd never felt anything like it. He said that shortly after that fight. He said he'd never felt power like that in his career. And he actually wobbled Sanders. It's only a one-round fight. But he wobbles Sanders, and then Sanders comes back at him and stops him. Strangingness says, predators have better fight IQ than humans, but couldn't deal with the Arnold hitting a double bicep flex and a Gatling gun crudely sprayed in all directions. But that's not what got the Predator in the original movie. Arnie blew it up, right, with its own self-destruct mechanism. He created that mud trap thing, you know? And that was one of the only Arnie movies that wasn't overtly corny. There was a few like slightly corny lines in it, but overall, Predator had like a serious and dark tone. It was one of the few Arnie films that was like that, because most of them were like real corny. I mean, corny in a great, funny, nostalgic way, but still. Shout out to Charles B for the super chat. He says, time for bed. Big up Hatman, catch you on the next one. And big up Charles B every time. Much appreciated, my bro. You have a good one. Okay, Wenxing says, come on, kill me. I'm here. Get to the chopper, it's going to explode. There's a bomb in here. Get to the chopper, it's going to explode. Yeah, I never liked Predator 2 either, Linkage. I was never a fan of Predator 2, but some people really love it. I've heard some people say they like Predator 2 better than the first one. But for me, it's all about the first one, man. People liking the Schwarzenegger. Arnold Schwarzenegger. I make myself laugh doing that impression, bro. Arnold Schwarzenegger. So Neil says, does Ray Robertson dominate any era of welterweight and middleweight? No. I mean, by modern standards, he wasn't even a welterweight, right? Because they used to weigh in on the day of the fight. So maybe these days he'd be more like a lightweight. Would he dominate lightweight of any era? He'd do very well in any era, I'm sure. But styles make fights, and I'm sure there would have been people in other eras that would have had his number. Shout out to Lawrence for the super chat. He says, was impossible to be low T and raised in the 80s and 90s with Schwartz, Stallone, Van Damme, Hulk Hogan, etc. on your TV every week. That's a whole fact. The heroes back then were like, well, roided up, truth be told. But yeah, the image that they would project of heroes back then was quite different to now. Although, you know, there are still big, hefty action actors today like The Rock. A lot of them are wrestlers, right? The Rock, John Cena. Okay, yes. The size game is correct. Terminator is not corny. That's right. The first Terminator is not corny. Yeah, that's right. That's right. First Terminator is not corny. Predator is not corny. Yeah, the first Terminator is dark, bro. That is a dark movie. Ishmael says, was it viral big news when Hay glassed Don Charles, or just talked about by boxing people? He didn't glass Don Charles, he glassed Derek Chisora, or he punched Derek Chisora with a bottle in his hand that smashed. No, it was huge news. It wasn't just boxing people. Outside of boxing, people were talking about it. It definitely crossed over. Action Popcast says, I think Terminator is better than T2. Many people disagree with me. they're very different kind of movies, and they're good for different reasons. It really is like comparing Alien to Aliens. They're both great movies, and James Cameron did direct the first Terminator movie. Correct me if I'm wrong. He directed the first and the second, right? But the second is more like a typical James Cameron movie, whereas the first one is like some kind of dark B movie. You know, it's not what we will come to know from James Cameron films at all. The first one, you know, had a very, very dark, kind of gritty tone. Maybe because it was low budget. But they were both very good films. I like them both, T2 and the first one. I can't really split them in terms of which I prefer, but somebody preferring the first one over the second one, that's not strange to me at all. Oh, for real? Purple Aki passed away. Psst. There'll be a lot of relieved people, let's be real, in the Liverpool area. In the Merseyside and the other areas that he would frequent, there'll be a lot of relieved people. Telstar says, Purple Aki squeezed my mate in Harrods. He got around with his plastic shopping bag. Some people are weird, bro. Very weird. Purple Aki could have been, if he'd behaved himself, if he'd stopped squeezing muscles, because there was some type of like ASBO, or not an ASBO, there was some type of like order placed on him where he wasn't allowed to squeeze muscles anymore. But he continued doing it. I saw videos long after that order came down from the court. I saw videos of him squeezing people's muscles still and telling people to do poses and all this kind of thing. Some people started appearing on, you know, like Instagram, willingly posing in front of Aki and all that kind of stuff. You know what the social media age is like. But Aki, if he'd played his cards right, he could have been the Fleece Johnson of the UK. Because Fleece Johnson, the booty warrior, has made what looks like a successful career now. Doing YouTube videos and going on all these different internet shows, and Drewski's show, he was on there. Dating shows, Pop the Balloon shows with Fleece Johnson. Because Fleece Johnson embraced what he is, whereas Purple Aki apparently never has. So, you know, he missed out on some social media success. That's right, Samil. Yeah, the booty warrior Fleece Johnson has got a wife now, allegedly. That's what he claims. He's claiming that he's got a wife. Fernie G says, have you caught any of the new Alien series, Hatman? I started watching like the first episode. It's called Alien Earth. But I don't know, I just drifted off without continuing to watch the first episode. But I've actually been watching some of the videos of people reviewing each episode. They've been quite interesting. Maybe I'll give it another go at one point and try and watch Alien Earth again. O'Neill says Castillo is the new booty warrior. Really? Castillo? Damn. Are you sure? Ishmael says, not looking good, bruv. Indeed. Why is man calling Castillo a booty warrior? Oh dear. He's supposed to be a gallus. Yeah, somebody saying, which Castillo? Is it the Castillo I'm thinking of? Like London pop culture, yeah, Brav Castillo with the ponytail. Is that the Castillo we're talking about, or is there a different Castillo? Yeah, James Cameron is a great artist. Like, he's a fantastic drawer. Is that the word for a drawer? What do you call him? He's great at drawing, James Cameron. He's fantastic at drawing. So he designed, a lot of the spaceships and stuff like that in Aliens and in, the robots and Terminator. He actually drew it all himself because he's very, very good at drawing. A draftsman. Okay, we'll go with that. An illustrator. Yeah, we'll go with illustrator. Yeah, James Cameron is a great illustrator. A fantastic illustrator. So, he storyboards everything when he makes his movies. Pro Keller says, are you a fan of Mr. Bean? Yeah, Mr. Bean was pretty funny back in the days. Classic British sitcom, The Mute Mr. Bean. But again, that was the case for the longest time. You would get people who were like sci-fi, science fiction writers. They were also great inventors and scientists themselves and so on and so on. I mean, Arthur C. Clarke, as much of a wrong'un as he apparently was, is alleged, I don't know if this is even true, but you can go online and on mainstream sites and you'll see this claim made, that Arthur C. Clarke actually invented the first satellite. It seems like a bizarre claim, but is that right? Arthur C. Clarke invented the first satellite? Or designed it? Arthur C. Clarke, Jules Verne. Anyway, peeps, gonna shut this one down. You know the routine. I'd like to big up each and every one of you for joining the conversation. It's been very enjoyable. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed it as well. And I'd like to give a special shout out to those who donated via Super Chat. They are Stephen Pemberton, Matt Borgerson, Kayvon Green, Lawrence King, Chainsaw, The Sweet Maths, D-Man, Super, The Box, Charles B. Big up. And before I go, actually, I made a suggestion in my Element group. I think it was yesterday. Big up Exactamundo, Rastafari. Do you guys remember 10 years ago or so, on Facebook in particular, people were creating these bingo memes, right? Frank Warren bingo. So it's like a grid, which has got like Frank Warren's face behind it. And in each of the squares on the grid, it's got words and phrases that Frank Warren always uses. Frank Warren bingo. So there was a Frank Warren bingo. There was a Jim Watt bingo. That was funny. He had punchies and bunchies and all that kind of stuff. The Jim Watt one was great. The Frank Warren one was great. There was an Eddie Hearn one. Today, there needs to be a Simon Jordan bingo. Because Simon Jordan bingo would have words on there like Jeopardy, nonsense. You know the way that Simon Jordan says nonsense? He's like, nonsense. So Jeopardy, nonsense. What's another word that Simon Jordan always uses? I made note of it. Where is it here? Let me check in the element group what it was. Yeah, Simon Jordan would be Jeopardy outcomes. Simon Jordan overuses the word outcomes. Even when it's like, he uses it sometimes out of context in an incorrect way, but it's funny the way he uses it. He's constantly talking about outcomes this, outcomes that. So outcomes would be on there. Jeopardy would be on there. Nonsense would be on there. So someone needs to do a Simon Jordan bingo. And also someone needs to do a Gad bingo. Gad bingo would be funny as well. At the center, in the center square of Gad bingo would be which word? Extraordinary. That's the word that would be at the center of Gad bingo. Extraordinary. He's an extraordinary character. Optics. Yeah, that's another one for Simon Jordan, is optics. Or is that for Gad? Maybe they both use that word. There you go, do your shower before you fight. Yes. So we need a Gad bingo and a Simon Jordan bingo. Hopefully somebody can come up with that. Anyway, peeps, I'm going to sign off here. Pick up everybody. Take care, be good. Until next time, I'll catch you on the other side. I'm out.